Okay, welcome everybody, and a warm welcome to those attending and also to our viewers watching live on the Council's YouTube channel, Hillingdon, London. This is a meeting of the Public Safety and Transport Select Committee. My name is Councillor Keith Burrows and I'm the chairman of this meeting. Just housekeeping for those in the room, we're not expecting a fire drill, so if the fire alarm goes off, we will vacate the building and meet at designated meeting points, which is on the front of the Civic Centre on the forecourt. And also for those in the room, please switch off any mobile devices to silent before the meeting starts. Thank you. Also for those watching via YouTube, if so minded, you can complete one of our resident feedback forms. These can be found in the information section underneath the YouTube video. These forms are intended to help us improve the way we run our meetings as a council. Before we move to the agenda, apologies, etc., I will go around the room as I usually do for those watching on YouTube so they know who is present. As I've already said, my name is Councillor Keith Burrows and I'm the chairman of this committee.
Good evening all, good evening Chairman. I'm Councillor Teddy Barnes, I'm the Vice Chair of the committee.
Good evening everybody, I'm Councillor Steve Tuckwell.
Good evening, I'm Councillor Colleen Sullivan.
Good evening, I'm Richard Lewis, Councillor for Northwood. No, we're not doing that bit, are we? No, right. Councillor Richard Lewis.
Hello everyone, good afternoon Chair. I'm Poonam Pathak, I'm Interim Head of Highways.
Stephanie Waterford, Head of Trading Standards, Environmental Health Licensing and ASBIT.
Good evening, Joanne Howell, Team Leader ASB and Environment Team.
Good evening all, Councillor Kuldeep Lakmana.
Good evening everyone, I'm Labour Lead. Jan Speating.
Steve Clark, Democratic Services Officer.
Thank you. I just think it helps those that are watching, if an officer speaks, at least they know who the officers are, and if any of us speak, they know who we are. Apologies for absence?
No apologies for absence this evening, Chairman.
Thank you. Are there any declarations of interest before us this evening? None declared. Thank you. We move on to receive the minutes of the previous meeting. As usual, I will go through each page. If anybody's got any queries, then we will come back to them. Page 1. Page 2. Page 3. Councillor Lewis?
I would just question about the work programme, item 62, that we were supposed to be seeing the Council's roads and footways resurfacing programme tonight, after it was deferred from the previous. And it's not within the agenda, so could we have an update on that?
Steve?
Of course, I mean, we have Poonam tonight. That is the kind of evolution of that item, because I don't believe the programme is final yet. So we can reschedule it for later in the year once that programme is final. I think the committee would like to see that, or whatever guise the committee is in next year.
Yeah, I think it's got to, because we can't really comment on anything that's going to go forward yet, because it hasn't been agreed and signed off at cabinet level. I think there were some late submissions, etc., and it's just not finalised. But you're quite right to bring that up, Councillor Lewis, and we have got it in the minutes now that we want to see that ASAP. I say we, it depends on who's on the committee in the new council year, obviously, after the elections. So, thank you for that. Moving on. To confirm that the items of business marked as Part 1 will be considered in public, items marked Part 2 will be considered in private. I can say that all items on the agenda this evening are Part 1 items and will all be considered in public. Which brings us on to agenda item 5, which is Highways Forward Programme Prioritisation, and we have Poonam Pathak, Interim Head of Highways, to deliver. So Poonam, it's over to you.
Thank you, Chair. I've given you the report. I'm sure everybody had opportunity to go through the report. It just outlines how we do the prioritisation. We have been doing worst first, which means the very bad road we do first and then leave the better condition to the last. But this year what we try to do is incorporating other factors like road usage, footfall, defect record, which our inspector have been picking up when they are walking about as per their safety inspection, taking the complaints and accident claim on board. So we have tried to prioritize in bigger scale as in the network level. So that has taken a bit longer than normal. So we could have adjusted worse first, but we have taken the view, the best practice as per Highway Asset Management Plan, which we'd like to take it forward. This is the best approach. So we have got more or less everything ready. It's just the final hierarchy need to be finalized. So that's why we haven't got the full scheme ready to bring it to the committee. So once it's been agreed with the cabinet member, then definitely we'll bring it to the committee in future. Just to give you the funding level, we have a £6 million per year been allocated for capital scheme for highways. So once we have a program, then we will have that money, capital release, taken forward as well. So we are planning, as I said, in Highway Asset Management Plan will be the next stage for us to move forward with 5-year program. So that's what we're working on. Not only year 1, we will be working on year 5 program as well, which will be amended as we go along with the more condition survey. So this is sort of brief description how we would like to do the prioritization. So any questions, I'm happy to take further.
I've got one, and you, Councillor Sweeton, I'll come to you after. I'm assuming that the annual condition surveys that we get in from the independent surveyors, I'm assuming we're not overriding any of that, because I can remember when I was cabinet member, we had to take serious note of what was in that report. I'm assuming we do that, and then we come on to the way you want to prioritise from our side once you've taken those into account first.
Definitely, Councillor Burrows. That is the main core data, is the condition. So we can't change if the condition is bad to good. So bad is going to stay the bad. So core, most of the weightage will be for the condition. Then we would like to see where we have a complaint, where we have a resident complaining and members complaining. So we have a list of those as well. So we want to incorporate everything in one. So we have a more of the everything is captured when we do the network prioritization, not just a condition of the network.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Sweeton?
Well, I'd like to thank Councillor Lewis for bringing to the notice of this meeting the fact that I thought we were going to have something different from this, and we're not. I thought we were going to have a list of the roads and pavements, etc. But maybe it will be possible for the other committee that's going to be here after today that we could have an annual audit of those roads and pavements, you know, by ward or by area, etc., so that we have got a full sort of index of exactly what's been done and where it's been done in the future, if that's a recommendation.
That's the intention, Councillor. So once we have a full programme ready, then we will try to bring it to the committee, next committee.
Can I have a subsequent question as well, please?
Well, I'm going to bring your colleague in first. Councillor McMahon.
Thank you, Chair. Poonam, you mentioned the proposed criteria that you're using and the other factors that you take into consideration. That list that you have of the road condition, the accident claims, etc., is that prioritised in any way, or is that just a list that you guys work to?
The way we do it is we give weightage to each criteria. So there will be some weightage for the accident claim where we have more claim coming through, or the defect record. So it's entire, the list of defects, or entire list of for how many years we have been collecting it. So we will put it in all in one basket with a weightage, and that will bring another index rather than just a number, what we have been doing all this year. Just bad is bad with a red, we're going to have a new index. So that's how we are prioritizing which is bad, what brings it up, with all the criteria included on it.
Thank you.
Councillor Sweeting.
I know that we've had a recent report about the Transport for London sort of allocation of just over £1 million, which is less than previous years. How has that impacted on our programme, please?
The TfL funding, that is only for the road safety and that area. Unfortunately, we haven't received anything for highway side of it. We have been bidding every year, but last few years we haven't had any opportunity to get the money from TfL. So that is actually affecting our A roads, which are funded from TfL. So they are deteriorating, but we are sort of making the case. So we should be funded for those as well.
Thank you. And I can actually vouch for the fact that there is a road that TfL are responsible for, Stockley Bypass, but we've just recently had to repair it ourselves because there was no funding. It got to a point that it was extremely dangerous, but we have done that just recently. Councillor Lewis, and I'll bring in Councillor Tuckwell.
How do we compare ourselves in grant applications to TfL compared to our neighbouring boroughs? Are they more successful in gaining money?
The way they have been doing is they look at the condition data, and that's where, and they do the visits as well. The TfL representative, they look at our data first, and they come and they visit it, and that's how they have been making the case. Unfortunately, because obviously they are suffering as well with the funding, so not many councils have been successful with the TfL bid for A roads for last few years. It's not only us. I think it's very limited money available at the minute.
Thank you. Councillor Lewis, have you got supplementary to that? I thought you was about to ask one.
Well, I was, but I mean, you're saying that all our neighbouring boroughs haven't done very well. It's just through the Transport for London running out of money, through mismanagement, that they can't give money to anybody. Is that what
For the principal road network, there are very less allocation, because there might be allocation for other areas of LIF funding, like road safety and other stuff. But for the principal renewal, there are very limited funding, so not many boroughs have been successful last 2 years. So we are one of the unfortunate ones as well. So.
Councillor Tuckwell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be brief, and again, thank you for your report. I think we all note that it's like a holding report pending when the schedule is ready to be published. And I do remember that we had a very extensive presentation a few months ago where you gave us some really insightful information on how the intervention levels are taken into account and the whole programme of inspections. So I think, for me, it just tells a bit of a story. It's bringing it all together, and I just look forward to the final chapter at some point when it's ready. So, but thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Tuckwell. We'll definitely bring it the programme once it's ready. Yeah.
That'd be good, because we won't be very happy. Well, I say we, as I say, we don't know who's going to be on the committee, but the committee probably won't be very happy if they don't see it next. Is any other questions, Councillor Sweeting?
Petitions seem to be a very important route for the delivery of some repairs to roads, pavements, etc. Now, I've seen some communities better at the petition route than others. So, is there a way of actually evening that out so that those areas of the borough that might not have, for example, residents' associations able to give the support in respect of petitions, how is that balanced up so there's some fairness, so that petitions don't always be the only route that that residents have in expressing their frustration at the state of roads and pavements?
Yeah, just going back to petition, might be in transport. I know Councillor Burrows have that experience in terms of petition. It is a good way of doing in transport area where you want a double yellow line, single yellow line, or CPGD areas and that sort of thing. But with the highways, because we are led by the data and there are lots of the subjective stuff attached to it, petition is not the only way to go forward, because we receive the petition. Sometimes we might be able to say, okay, we won't be able to do it because we have other roads which are failing than this. But it depends. If it is bad road, we would have taken it forward anyway. So I won't say I don't want to encourage petition just for the highway side of it. I don't know whether that would be the good way, because otherwise we'll be losing out the worst road. That is my view.
Yeah, when I used to do petitions, if I got one regarding road surfacing, I would ensure it was inspected, see where it sat on the list already. But you're quite right. You prioritise on the condition surveys we get. Petition route isn't always the best route, but we do also intelligent intervention anyway, and sometimes when a petition comes in, you actually go off and you see to it, and there's no need for the petition, so that gets done as well. And obviously there's always the councillors that can report, so councillors can report themselves. So yeah, thank you, Poonam. Any other questions? No? Well, thank you, Poonam, and I'll just echo what Councillor Tuckwell said. I can remember the very extensive presentation you gave us last time, which gave us a very good insight into the whole of the highways process. So we do look forward to the next stage of this coming back to the committee for review. So thank you for attending this evening.
Thank you. Thank you.
Right, moving on to item 6, fines and prosecutions, in brackets including dog fouling, close bracket. So I've got down Joanne Howes as the team leader to speak, and Stephanie, I'm assuming you're there in case we need you. Thank you. I don't think we will though. I'm sure your staff member will be able to do this. So it's over to you, Joanne.
Thank you, Chair. I was asked to produce this report on fixed penalty notices and offences, what we use them for across the borough, how successful they are, the legislation we use, including dog fouling, and obviously I've set out the legislation that is available to us, and the circumstances surrounding in which we would issue fixed penalty notices, and that is dependent on obviously the strength of evidence that we receive at the time. I can say that over the last 3 months the rate of FPN, or fixed penalty notice issue, has increased with the spring, and obviously coming out of COVID and lockdown, the footfall has increased across the borough, and we're identifying specific offences, particularly related to the Public Spaces Protection Order, and that's a very useful tool that is used across the borough for issuing fixed penalty notices and taking enforcement action. Obviously, when we issue an FPN, and if a resident decides to pay it, that's the discharge of their liability, and it goes no further. If they decide that they do not want to pay it, or they contest it, then the option is to go to court, and it's decided at court whether it will be followed through or not.
I've got just a couple of queries that I went through, and I'm assuming because in part 8, I think point 8 answers the second bullet point of 12. So on page 10, paragraph 8, where it says about the FPM bring the system into disrepute, prosecution should be considered instead. I'm assuming that's where the offence that has been committed is too serious in scale or effect to merit the FPN. And I'm assuming that we then have to make that judgment call on whether it's going to go to court.
Yes, we do. It totally depends on the evidence, the level of the antisocial behaviour that's occurring, and also in cases we get repeat offenders where they're issued more than one ticket, and we get to the point where it's not working, it's not having any impact on their behaviour at all, so we've got no choice but to go to court and prosecution.
Okay, thank you. And the other one is around where their ability to understand English, because we know now that the UK, like many countries across the world, are multilingual now, and diverse habitats, etc., across the country. So how often do our officers come across that, and how do they get around the fact that the person cannot really understand what's being said to them?
There's two factors there, Chair. One is our environmental enforcement team, who are very diverse, and they've got a lot of people within their organisation, which are an external contractor that Hillingdon Council use. And they have people available that speak a multitude of languages and can get that understanding across. The second issuing people would be our enforcement officers, as in ASB officers specifically employed by Hillingdon Council. And if we encountered somebody that couldn't speak English, we can get a translation service relatively quickly online or via the mobile phone to explain the circumstances to them.
That's what I wanted to hear. Thank you. Councillor Lewis, I think you've been indicated.
Yep. Thank you, Chairman. Do we go for compensation orders at the magistrates' courts for things like fly tipping?
Yes, we do. Yeah.
Are we successful?
We have been recently, although the person that we've taken to court hasn't got a lot of funds at the moment, so we've ended up with a prison and a custodial sentence instead. So it depends on obviously the person that goes to court whether they've got the funds available or not.
Sure. And has anybody ever attended any of the bench meetings to actually ask for bench policies to be put in, local bench policies to be put in place? Which you can.
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Thank you, Councillor Lewis. Councillor Sweetin.
Thank you, and thank you for the report, because it's both interesting and informative, because it does give a legal context, I think, which we, the details you've provided. If I can start with dog fouling, it is a serious issue in my ward, but I'm certain a lot of other wards as well, especially when it's on a route to school, when children are nearby, etc. And the signs are put up, but I'm afraid the signs are ignored many times. And I don't know whether there's any other larger signs, more impactful signs that could be used, that maybe we could learn from other authorities, good practice there. I don't know whether that's been investigated, but certainly the signs that have been put up in various areas of my ward have not really related to an improvement in the situation, I'm afraid.
Thank you. In terms of dog fouling, it is a blight across the borough, I have to say. The issue for us is catching the resident with the dog committing the act at the time. Unless we have evidence to support that, it's really difficult to enforce against. However, we look at other issues. So, for instance, there was a school alleyway where there was a lot of dog fouling going on. So we liaised with the school and the parents to try and get some letters out to the parents. If you're going to bring your dogs to school or walk your children to school, at least make sure that you're picking up after your dogs. There's signs, there's additional dog bins that we can put out. We've also got the environmental enforcement team that we send out on regular checks where the specific areas are identified to patrol at the times where it's prevalent, and if they witness anyone, they will attempt to issue a fixed penalty notice.
Councillor McMahon.
Sorry, did you? Thank you, Chair. The litter, the fly tipping that we have in the wards, the dustbins which are provided in parks, they are in the traditional green logo for Hillingdon, which I can understand. But has it been considered to make them more bright or more impactful, so that people know that's where the bins are and they can be used? Because you see lots of litter around the bins rather than in the bin itself. And this was a suggestion by a 10-year-old that was in the park and said, can bins not be made brighter so that people see them there? The green bins blend in with the grass, with the green areas, which is good.
I mean, Councillor, that would be something outside our remit for waste services, because they actually put the bins out.
Right.
We obviously take the enforcement in terms of the littering and the fly tipping around the bins, but it's certainly a useful suggestion that I was raised with waste services and see whether they've looked into it.
Thank you.
I'll bring Councillor Sweeting back because I did talk over the top of her. Councillor Sweeting. Then I'll bring you back, Councillor Lewis.
Thank you, Chair. This is an area that may not be in your remit, but any advice that you could give me would be very gratefully received. An area of real concern that's happening in my particular ward, but not only in my ward, is this issue of airport parking. People coming in, it's become so prevalent because there's actually an app now that says, oh, these are the roads that have not got residents parking. Please come and use these roads. Now, is there anything that we can do, apart from obviously the residents parking route, which is a different route? Is there anything, any powers that we have as a council to deter or to proceed with some sort of way of deterring these people? Because literally there are, I think, 10 roads now in my ward where suddenly it seems to be airport parking is the problem.
I can take that for you, Joanne. It wouldn't come under ASB, it actually comes under parking services. And when I was Cabinet Member, in my time as Cabinet Member, we had an awful lot of that. We had a very successful prosecution of someone that had used one of our actual public car parks to park loads of cars over one weekend and took the whole car park. But it would be parking services more than anybody, because we would have to obviously put it out to our parking contractors if they are parked illegally. What you've got to remember is there is the element when you have the enforcement officer has to give a certain amount of observation time, and taxis, etc., do know that, and it turns into cat and mouse, and it's been going on for years, unfortunately. So it is an issue, and it's something that they do their best as they can, but when you move it from one area, it will go to another one. I've seen Stephanie waving at me, so Stephanie.
Thank you, Councillor Burrows. I was just going to come in on the trading standards angle, who worked jointly with parking services on that big case, and we were able to collaborate and work together to bring successful criminal charges for fraud in that particular instance. I'm aware of the ME that you've raised recently relating to those roads, and I can say that trading standards are investigating a particular company. So obviously when we can release a bit more detail about that, then we'll let you know. But the engagement with that company's customers has been extremely good, and we are following up some leads, and our trading standards manager will be writing to you to just tell you what he's doing in terms of that particular member's inquiry.
Thank you so much for that.
Councillor Lewis?
Somewhat slightly to the side of what we've been discussing, but amusingly the dog waste bins are now being called poo tins. But they are painted, they're red, and the colour doesn't seem to make any difference as to people putting waste into them or not. So I'm not sure changing the rubbish bins to green would change anything, from green.
Thank you both. Any other questions? We've got Councillor Barnes, Councillor Tutwell, back to Councillor Sweeting.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Joanna. I just wanted to ask, on page 17, the commercial premises fixed penalty notices, these businesses who will just leave their litter. I know in my ward there was a particular business that just kept on leaving their bags out 2 days before they were due because they just didn't open those 2 days, and then they caused a massive amount of mess all over the pavements. I was quite surprised actually how low that the fines are for a business if they've made that much mess. it seems to, I think, is quite a prevalent thing in the borough. What would you think?
Councillor, yes, it is. Fly tipping's an issue, which is what that would come under. And we also, obviously, our enforcement officers will go out and carry out duty of care waste checks at businesses to make sure they've got the appropriate waste documents. If they haven't, they will receive what we call a producer. They're given a certain amount of time to produce the documents. If they don't, then they receive a fine. The issue we have with, obviously, accumulation of waste is the level of evidence we've got to have to be able to issue a fixed penalty notice for fly tipping or rubbish is high. It's got to meet criminal standards, because we've got to be able to pursue that in a court if there's an appeal or it's not paid. And that's where the issue is for us. The evidence, we've either got to have a witness to say, yes, that person from that premises dropped that bag at that time, or we've got to have CCTV evidence. Just recovering stuff from the rubbish itself is not sufficient according to our legal team, so we can't pursue it any further. But we are aware it's a big issue across the borough, and we are sending out the enforcement teams to different premises to do the relevant checks.
Councillor Tuckwell and Councillor Sweeting.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and hello, Joanne. Good update, but I can't beat Putin's, I'm afraid. I won't be able to top that, but I am going to go back to dog fouling, and I do appreciate how difficult that is to enforce and get evidence. But you mentioned about fixed penalty notice. Have we actually issued any for dog fouling?
Very few, Councillor, if I'm honest, because it's actually catching them doing it at the time. And even if we had CCTV footage, we would then have to prove where that person came from, because obviously it's a snapshot of what's happening at that time, but it doesn't actually show where that person's going or where they've taken the dog to. So unless that dog or that owner is known to local residents, it's so difficult.
Can I just quickly come back on that? Because it would be, again, I appreciate how tricky that would be to make it stick, but it would be useful to at some point use it as a bit of a deterrent that, you know, people will get fined, but again recognising it's normally either early in the morning or late at night, people are walking their dogs, and I think for the record it is, from my experience, most dog owners are very responsible. It's just the very small few that spoil it for everybody else. But no, thanks for your efforts.
Councillor Sweeting.
I think the pandemic has done various things, but I think a lot more people are working from home, and I think a lot more builders might be working from home, because I'm finding that some are using skips in their front gardens as sort of unofficial waste transfer stations. I was just wondering what sort of evidence the council needs to ensure that these sorts of practices can be stopped.
Councillor, if there's a skip in somebody's private property on their front garden, and the waste is stored correctly on it, and it's not household waste where it doesn't attract vermin, or it's not a public health nuisance, there is nothing we can do about it. If it's on the road, that's a different matter on the highway.
Just come back on that one. When it's absolutely obvious that the building, the private residence is being used as a store for building materials, etc., you know, and that residents are seeing the vans coming up from various jobs going into that skip, is that not evidence enough?
If a skip is on a private property, it's a completely different issue for us, because it's within a person's private property. There might be follow-ups in terms of trading standards. There might be something to do with the police if it's fraudulent activity that's going on the property in terms of them accepting business or commercial waste and depositing in the skip. If there's issues over, like I say, the public health or rat infestation or household waste being put on there, then that's something that we would certainly look into.
Councillor Lukmana.
Thank you, Chair. Just following on from that, if it's private land and people are using that space to service their cars or running a business event and leaving litter behind, is there any action that can be taken because it's private land or not?
There is legislation available to us to deal with such circumstances. So it would be under the ASB Crime and Policing Act 2014, where we could look at community protection warnings. But that would be dependent on how many residents complained, what the nature of the issues were, and obviously on the evidence provided as well.
Thank you.
Councillor Barnes?
Hi, thank you. I just wanted to comment actually, Joanne. It just reminded me on the dog fouling thing. We've actually, there's a brilliant way to report it, isn't it, on our website? You can go straight onto there to report it. And I thought on there it said that if they don't, or if they're caught or something, that the fine does go up to about £1,000. Is that correct?
The initial fine is £80, and they get a discount if they pay it early. However, if they don't pay it, then yes, and we end up in court, it can go up to that amount. Apologies.
But it never does.
Any other questions for Joanne on this report? No? Thank you, Joanne, for an extensive report. Very good detail within it. Certainly shows the various FPNs that you deal with, the various problems you come across daily. So thank you for that. So we now move on to item 7, abandoned vehicles. And again, we have Joanne and Stephanie. And is it you, Joanne, again, to present? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I was asked to produce a report on abandoned vehicles, the process for it, what can be reported, what we can look into, how we remove the vehicles, and basically the volume of reports that we do receive. Some are, when they're reported by residents directly, they're reported onto our website, and they're not actually fall within the legislation of abandoned vehicles, but they do come up as abandoned vehicles, so the volumes look high. But when you actually look into it and find that it is taxed or it's registered and it's MOT'd and it's perfectly legitimately left on a highway, then there's nothing we can do about it. I think over the pandemic, people highlighted it a lot more because we're at home, so they would notice when vehicles weren't being moved, and some residents were stuck abroad or out of the country and weren't coming back for 30 days or so, and then these vehicles would get reported to us. It hasn't moved, nobody's been to it, and actually it's not an abandoned vehicle, someone's just been stuck out of the country. There's not much we can do with it.
It is a tricky one, abandoned vehicles, and as you say, to some person they think it's totally abandoned because it's been outside their house for X number of days and nobody's moved it, nobody's been near it. Well, in fact, you know, you've given a classic example during the pandemic why that vehicle hasn't moved. I've got one question to ask you, and I know that Councillor Tuckwell had the same thought as me as well. We have a high number of vehicles in this country that still have their overseas plates on them. That almost makes it impossible for us to do anything with them, doesn't it? Because we can't put it through DVLA. Is that still the reason?
Yeah, DVLA don't hold a database of foreign number plates. The police do have access, and there are sites we can go on to check some foreign vehicles. We would then approach that in a different way. So if we would class it as a nuisance vehicle, then there may be some action we can take without actually going to DVLA to get it removed or to try and find the owner. So there are other options available to us, not just through DVLA. But as I'm sure you're aware, Councillor, DVLA criteria for checking a vehicle is very strict, and we're audited on that yearly so that we don't lose our licence to check.
No, exactly. That's one thing we don't want to do is lose the licence to check, because then we'd be scuppered even on those that are registered in the UK. Any questions for Joanne on this report? Councillor Sullivan?
Abandoned vehicles, I know it's a bane of everybody's existence. We have a spate of them on the board that I represent, and I recently reported one which has been there for about 4 months and the wheel hasn't turned. I know it's taxed and tested, but are there any other scenarios you can look at? Because you come back and say there's nothing we can do because it's taxed and tested. Do you look at the fact that it could be stolen, or it's a cloned vehicle, or do you involve the police?
Yes, Councillor, we certainly do. If we've got concerns about a vehicle, we would involve the police and ask them whether they've got any interest in it or whether they're doing an investigation. Also, there's vehicles that are left for insurance purposes where they've been in accidents and things like that, which we can't remove because they belong to the insurance company, obviously responsible with the accident. So yeah, we do look at other alternative methods, and we can, as I said earlier, look at them as nuisance vehicles rather than abandoned vehicles. So if they're obstructing or they're causing particular issues or road safety issues, then there are things we can look at that way.
Thank you.
Councillor Lewis and Councillor Barnes.
Well, it's just a couple of points really. One is I thought that cars had to be insured in the UK after being imported after 6 months, and if you comment on that. But also, I mean, is it just coincidence that in 2020 and 2021 there are exactly 1,209 cars imported abandoned, or is it just the same 1,209 cars were left on the streets and not removed?
No, Councillor, it's purely a coincidence. When I got those figures, I thought, okay, 1,209, that's, yeah.
Did you want to comment about the 6 months on the insurance side?
In terms of the insurance side, we don't deal with that. That would be a police matter.
Right.
We have no jurisdictional legislation to deal with that.
But it's probably worth, if they have been left on a foreign car has been left on the road for 6 months, you could then report it to the police as being likely to be uninsured in this country. Yeah,
I mean, I've done that before in terms of making inquiries about vehicle insurance, but unfortunately because the vehicle insurance database that the police use don't belong to the police, they can't then pass that information across to us, because I've had problems with that before. It would then be a matter for the police to have a look into it.
Councillor Barnes.
Thank you, Chairman. I was about to say the same thing that Councillor Lewis has just said about the two exact figures. Joanne, the two same figures, are these in the same areas then in the borough, or are they just completely random areas? They just have to be the same amount of cars?
Completely random areas. There's no hotspots in terms of abandoned vehicles. It's
right,
wherever people leave them.
Right, okay, thank you.
Councillor Sweeting.
The problem I've got in my ward is that some of the parking areas are the responsibility of possibly housing associations or private organisations, and there's often abandoned vehicles there. What powers has the council got to sort of deal with those? Because often you get very little response from the people that should be dealing with it, let's put it that way.
We can look into abandoned vehicles on private land, but we would need the permission of the landowner to be able to remove it and deal with it. Without that, we couldn't go onto the land and take it, because that would technically be theft, and that wouldn't leave the council in a very good position, so we would need the landowner's permission.
But these are taking up spaces, that means that residents are not able to park because of the number of vehicles that have just been left, so there is a problem there.
I mean, that would be for us to speak with the housing association and liaise with them directly to say, please look into this and try and get them removed.
And that very point's covered on page 24, 3B, where it says if Class A or B vehicle is abandoned on private land. And it goes on to back up what you just said, Joanne. Any other questions on this report? No? Thank you again, Joanne, for a good report. Giving us a flavour of the abandoned vehicles and the 2 years where they both hit 1,209. Must have been the pandemic. What are the chances? So thank you again for attending this evening. Thank you, Stephanie, for attending as well and presenting to the committee. So moving on. We now move on to the Cabinet Forward Plan. There are items, obviously, on the Forward Plan. Obviously, we've got the Cabinet meeting next week on the 21st of April, where they are considering a direct award contract on that one. but when you look on the further reports, really we can just note them as this committee because we don't know the format of this committee when these reports will be coming forward. So I think we just need to actually note the reports that are on the Cabinet Forward Plan at this stage. Because of the elections, as I said, we don't know the format of this committee after they have been held. So is that agreed that we just note the Forward Plan and the items on it? Okay, which brings us on to agenda item 9, which obviously is the work programme going forward from May 21, summer 2022, on top of here. I think that's meant to be slightly different. But we look at it here, and can I just say that at the next meeting, I've had a discussion with the director responsible for ASB, and they have said to me that they will attend the first meeting of this committee when it meets and convenes for its first meeting after the elections to give a thorough update on ASB service transition progress. So that will be on the agenda then. So can we make sure that that is included within the work programme so that whoever is on the committee next time round, they know they are going to get that. Obviously, those are the dates. These are the published dates which were agreed at full council for this committee. Obviously, the first meeting is June the 9th, where we will select, or the committee will select. This
is last year's.
Yeah, it is last year's. Yeah, I just realised that at the top. But certainly, we will be. It's June the 8th. We will certainly be looking to see what our scoping report's going to be, and the topic. I say we. It depends. That could be the royal we. Going forward, but certainly the ASB report is definitely going to be, and that's been agreed with the Director of Finance when Director of the service when I spoke to him last week. So, is there any? I'll let the clerk come in first. There could be some words of wisdom here.
Also due to note, we all know the structure of scrutiny is going to be subject to change potentially after the election. So the work programmes for next year's select committees, in whatever guise they are, haven't been fully fleshed out. So here you've only got going into June and July and the summer months. Another item has been added yesterday to the September meeting, which would be the statement of gambling policy. Policy framework for that, which has been added, needs to be reviewed every 3 years, and as part of that review it will come to the select committee. But as I say, following the election, there will be a thorough fleshing out of a work programme for the following municipal year.
Thanks, Steve. Councillor Sweeting.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair, for that. Was just looking at the internal audit report when, it stated about the problems that ASBET had, and it did say that their first tranche of improvements would be implemented by July of last year. I don't know whether we've got a confirmation on whether that's actually happened or not.
We've got no confirmation. As I say, the director responsible for this service wants to come and address a committee, be it called the Public Safety and Transport Select Committee or another guise, at its very first meeting, where there'll be a full update of progress and transition. The full transition will be revealed then. We agreed on the work programme for the new guide programmes. So thank you. Can I just say thank you to all of you as a committee for seeing through this year with the new select committee structure. I was very pleased with the outcome from our electric vehicle review and the charging points review. I'd like to thank you all for your commitment and your input into that, and also each report that we've had from various officers and your questions. I'd also like to thank you, Steve, for being our clerk. You've kept us certainly in line and in order, and have brought forward things for us in a very timely manner, so thank you. And I know sometimes we've said to you, well, why isn't that coming? And we realise that's not your fault, but at the time you're the one delivering the bad news. But thank you anyway.
Don't shoot the messenger.
No, don't shoot the messenger, as they say. So thank you, everybody, and we shall see you on the committee after the elections. So thank you.
Thank you very much.